Number 1. Hospital. There was this old abandoned hospital on some private land just outside of the town that I grew up in. It closed down decades before, and the road leading to it was closed off by the owners, so very few people had ever even seen it since it was closed. But it was something that the kids in school always talked about, as if it was haunted. When I was 15, my best friend and I decided we wanted to go and check it out. We'd never been there before, but we always liked to explore the woods, especially in places that we weren't supposed to be. So we always tried to find the hospital, and one day we lucked out and came across it. The building was huge, much bigger than I had expected it to be. My friend Tim and I were excited, and even more so when we weren't able to find any security keeping us from the building. We got up to it and went searching for a way to get in. It wasn't difficult because many of the windows had been broken out. It was weird being inside the building. When it was closed down, it seems that they had left a whole lot of equipment and furniture there. Plus there was graffiti on the walls, which we figured came from other explorers like us. What we found most interesting, though, was just the really morbid atmosphere of the building. It was so huge and so dark, and it truly felt like an evil place. I mean, I don't know how else to put it than that. Tim and I didn't believe in ghosts, and we weren't scared of that. But there was just this really unnerving feeling about the building. We gave it little mind, as we kept exploring the huge building. We were in a basement level when Tim told me he'd heard something. I thought he was just trying to scare me until I heard it too. It sounded like someone was moving around in one of the rooms. We figured it was an animal, so we thought we would go and check it out. Tim opened the door to the room that we were hearing the noises from. It was really dark in the room, but we had a flashlight, so Tim was flashing it around the room, trying to see if he could find what had been making the noise. The flashlight landed on a figure who was crouched down in the corner of the room. It was a person who was filthy and hiding their face behind their arm. When the light landed on the person, he fell forward until he was on all fours, but still he was hiding his face from our views. It was really creepy, and he didn't move or do anything at first. Suddenly we heard the man say, "What'd you do to my face? Why did you steal my face?" And then he began crawling toward the two of us at a lot faster speed than a man his shape should have been moving. Tim and I hightailed it out of the room and ran for the steps. We got up the steps and then kept running until we were sure that that man was not following us anymore. I think at that point, we decided we were content with what we had seen and decided to get out of there. We had a scary story, so I guess that made the trip worth it. Oh, and in case anyone is wondering, we think it was just a crazy homeless person, not a ghost or anything. But why he was talking about us stealing his face is something we speculated on for a long time. We had never seen his face, so we often wondered what it would have looked like. Number 2. Paying it forward. Once when I was a lot younger, I used to have to walk a lot of great distances. I didn't always have a car, so I was stuck doing this many times. Every now and then, when the weather was really, really hot, or it was pouring down rain, I would luck out, and someone would give me a ride. But those rides were few and far between. Still, when they would happen, it was so nice, and I was so appreciative that I swore to myself that I would absolutely pay it forward whenever I did have a car. When I did start driving, the opportunities didn't present themselves as often as I thought that they would. I would see people walking, but it was usually in town. If it wasn't in town, it was never in extreme weather. So for several years, I never really got the opportunity to be as helpful to someone as my rides had been to me. I also began to wonder if I was the only person that I knew who ever had to walk around as much as I used to. It wasn't until late one night, when I was on the way home from a relative's house, that I had an encounter with someone that needed a ride. My uncle lived way out in the hills in a cabin, and I'd spent a lot of time over his house that night. It was around 1 in the morning when I finally let him know I had to get home. There weren't many homes on those hills. There were winding dirt roads all over the place, though. While I was driving, I turned a curve around a hill, and I noticed a figure ahead of me on the road. I immediately could tell that it was a woman, and she was walking on the side of the road. I had no idea why someone would be out walking on those roads that late at night, and I decided that I would offer her a ride. I pulled up next to her, and when I did, she stopped walking and looked at me. I had my window rolled down, and she bent over as I asked her if she needed a ride. She told me that she could really use one. She lived pretty far from here, and if she had to walk all the way home, it would take her forever to get there. I told her I would be happy to give her a ride, and that is when she reached into her jacket and she pulled out a gun and pointed it at me. She ordered me to get over to the passenger seat of the car, which I did immediately. She got in behind the steering wheel with the gun still pointed at me. When she was in, she ordered me out of the car. When I almost resisted, she cocked the gun, and that was all it took for me to get out of the car and shut the door. She drove off immediately. So the first time I got a chance to pay it forward, it all blew up in my face. In addition to being devastated about that, I just had my car stolen on a dirt road in the middle of the hills. I was far from my uncle's house at that point, all alone in the dark, with no choice really but to keep walking down that dirt road. So I began walking. This was not only going to take forever, but it was very scary walking around out there. It was very, very dark. There was no moon out that night. All the sounds of the woods, which I normally thought were comforting, were less so on this night. I seemed more aware of them. It seemed I could hear them clearer, but also hear other noises that I normally wouldn't have. I began wondering if the woman who stole my car had accomplices out in the trees that might have tried to attack me afterward. Still, I had no choice but to keep walking and see where I would end up. And that is when the strangest thing happened. I'd been walking for maybe about 45 minutes when I saw the red lights on the back of a car up ahead. But it wasn't a car that was moving. It was sitting alongside the side of the road, but it seemed like it was still running. I got up closer and realized that it was my car. I was immediately worried that the woman would be there too. Perhaps she was waiting to ambush me and kill me this time. But she could have easily killed me before, so that didn't make any sense. So I just cautiously approached the car, expecting something to happen at any moment. There was no one around the car at all. I kept looking around to see if someone was hiding off in the trees or something, but I was unable to locate anyone. So when I finally decided I was all alone with the car, I quickly got in, rolled up the windows, and locked all the doors. The car was running but was in park, so I put the car into gear and started driving down the hill. This time, however, I had no plans to stop for anyone, whether it seemed like they needed a ride or not. Anyway, I got down off the hill and onto the main road without encountering anyone. I had no idea what had happened. The whole thing was just so odd. There had been no sign of the woman anywhere, and she hadn't taken anything from my car. She just abandoned it on the side of the road after driving it for a short while. Well, I asked my uncle later if he knew anyone who fit her description, but he didn't. It didn't seem familiar to him at all. I thought he wouldn't believe me since it was such an incredible story, but he told me he had heard weirder things before. I never found out what happened that night, really. I never encountered the woman again, but I'm happy to say that I did pick up other people and give them rides. I wasn't going to let that one encounter spoil me wanting to do a good deed for someone. Number 3. Luke. I met a guy online back in 2002. He was part of a pagan website that I was also part of. But I don't want you to think this story is anti-pagan or anything like that. It's simply how I came across him. He also had an online journal/diary that I would sometimes read. However, I don't think that he ever knew that I read it. After I invited him to come out from the Boston area to Chicago to visit me, he did post about the trip in his online diary. So I got the impression that he was really looking forward to coming and seeing me. His name was Luke, and I remember picking him up from the airport. I took off a few days from work and had the weekend off normally, so we had some time to spend together. He told me a lot of outlandish stories that I truly didn't believe, but I really liked him, so I thought that we were going to have a good time together. While he was sleeping, a few days into the visit, I decided to check his online diary out. In it, he told a completely fictional tale of what had happened since he came to see me. He claimed that he found a secret room in my apartment, and in it was a shrine that I built to him. He told his readers that he was worried that I was going to do something to hurt him. But what worried me, most of all, was that he also told them that he felt he had to do something to hurt me first, before I got a chance to hurt him. He said that he took a knife out of my chopping block and put it in his suitcase, and would use it on me when I went to sleep, and then he would leave. It was weird, eerie, and unlike anything else he had ever posted in the diary. However, I remember the stories that he told me, the ones that I hadn't believed. Then I began to get very worried. So I was really scared that he would actually try to do something to me. I thought about the comment about taking the knife from my chopping block, so I went into the kitchen to see if any of my knives were missing. One was. I tried to be careful and quiet as possible and checked in his suitcase. My missing knife was in there. I was scared, but took it out and put it back in the knife block. It took me a while until I decided what to do. I went and took his suitcase and took it down to my car. I put it there in the trunk. When Luke woke up, I told him that I had an emergency that I needed to take care of, and I could either put him in a hotel for the rest of his stay or get him an early ticket for a flight back home. He was a bit confused, as I expected him to be, and I let him know that I'd already put his suitcase in the car. He asked if I could put him up in a motel close to the airport. I took him to the motel and went to park the car. He took his suitcase and went into the office. I drove off right then and left him to himself. I don't know what he was planning, but I bet he figured out that I knew when the knife wasn't in his suitcase anymore. Number 4. Sleepover. I grew up in a very rural and large family. Most of my relatives, including myself, lived in some really country dwellings. In fact, I don't even remember living in a house that had a bathroom until I was 10 years old. My parents were divorced, and they rarely were able to find any work. A lot of our food was grown in the garden, where we got it from hunting. I didn't really know this at the time, but mental illness also seems to run in our family. Back then, people didn't talk about it so much. Also, when people were extremely mentally ill, we didn't think of them like that. We thought that something was wrong with them. You know, something different than mental illness. For example, a sister of mine used to kneel down in front of the wall and talk as if someone were sitting behind the wall, listening to her. We never thought that she might have schizophrenia, and my other sister and I simply thought there was a ghost in the wall. But as time went on, and many of our other relatives were found to suffer from things as schizophrenia. We began seeing things differently. I had to bring that up because I had a really scary experience when visiting the house of one of my aunts. Her son, my cousin, nowadays, I would probably assume had schizophrenia. However, at the time, we didn't think of any such thing. He always had problems and felt that spirits were after him. He would always tell us about the spirits and such that he had seen, and being that young, it was extra terrifying for us. I told one of the stories here before. It was about visiting them, and the dogs had been acting really weird. Then outside we came and saw a glowing cow. But as weird and scary as that story was, it was nothing like the one that happened this time. My cousin was acting even stranger than normal this time. He had gone from telling us that there were spirits that he saw, and he actually believed that the devil was after him. We were all raised pretty religiously, so this wasn't something that we took lightly. There was nothing scarier than the possibility of the devil coming after us. My aunt was doing her best to try and make him not tell stories like that around us. We were too young, in her view, to hear scary stories. But he still would tell us, and every time that we went to bed while we were visiting, we expected something bad to happen. We were staying at the house for about a week this time. My two sisters and I were sleeping in the living room, as we normally did. We were all woken up by hearing some screaming coming from my cousin's room. He kept yelling, "The devil has me! He's taking me to hell!" Of course this woke up everyone in the small house, but it was quicker for us three girls to get to his room than it was for his parents. I, being the oldest, opened up his door and turned on the light in there. What I saw I would never forget. My cousin was chained to his bed. He was yelling and screaming that the devil had come into his room, had chained him down, and was ready to take him to hell. I had never heard anyone screaming in such terror before or since. He was struggling against the chains to no avail and seemed in utter distress. My aunt made us get out of the room, where she and her husband came into the room. They closed the door and told us not to come in. It took a while for them to get him to stop screaming. Eventually he did, though, and the parents told us to simply go to bed. They didn't speak about it to us, ever, so we don't know what went on after we were booted from the room. I can't explain why he was chained to the bed. Part of me thinks he had these attacks during the night, every now and then, and his parents must have chained him to the bed. I don't really know, and he never mentioned it. After that visit, we didn't spend the night over there again, so I don't know what became out of all of it. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. First off, I would like to thank my paid Patreon members, starting with my two VIP members, Pixie Hopper 8 and Chiamerah Cat. My other two are Heidi H and Chronic J. Thank you very much for your support. And thank everyone who has been here for my sister and I after the loss of our dog Buffy. Everyone has been great about this, and we appreciate it very much. It's been a hard couple of weeks not seeing her around, but we have gotten a lot better. If you want to join my Patreon, you can join also as a free member. Although I post short videos for paying members, I do post the text of those stories for free members too. You can also feel free to join my Discord. All links are in the description. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting that like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please consider hitting the subscribe button and the bell to be notified of new videos. Leave me a comment to let me know what you thought of the video, and share it with someone you think might enjoy it. I try to get back to as many comments as I possibly can, and if you have an original story you would like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address included in the description. I would like to mention and thank the free members of my Patreon: The Vama Guy 334, Michael Vasquez, Bonnie Lynn, Collet Bond, Krista Pike, Prince UVA, HF Creations, Bonnie Gibbs, Linda Moore, DJ Lira, and Evil Black Cat. And most importantly, don't forget to remember to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.